Helping them isn't charity, it's obligation. My daughter-in-law shrieked, convinced my $18 million fortune was hers to control. Minutes later, she slammed the door, leaving me to freeze on the porch in my nightgown as my son watched. They gambled with my life to make a point, but their calculated risk was about to become their ruin. Before we jump back in, don't forget to subscribe while you're listening, and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Now, take a breath and listen closely. This is my story. The blizzard clawed at my bare arms, but it was the cold in Clara's eyes that truly froze me. Maybe this will teach you not to interfere with our family decisions, my daughter-in-law Clara hissed, her breath pluming white in the sub-zero air. The heavy oak door, once a symbol of welcome, slammed shut. A dull, sickening thud against the howling wind. I stood there, shivering, clad only in a thin nightgown, and a hastily grabbed my breath hitched, not from the biting cold, though it seared my skin, but from the raw, impossible disbelief swelling in my chest. This wasn't happening. Not here. Not to me. This wasn't some dramatic story. It was chillingly real. Every fibre of my being screamed at the injustice. Every gust felt like a personal insult, mocking my vulnerability, my 70 years, suddenly a crushing weight of overlooked sacrifices. I stumbled back, clutching the coat, the icy air clawing at my lungs, through the frosted glass. Clara's silhouette, then Adam's, stood motionless. They weren't coming back. They had meant it. The escalating arguments of the past year, the sharp accusations, the subtle digs that had shed all pretense of kindness. It all culminated in this deliberate, horrifying act of abandonment. A wave of helplessness washed over me, cold as the snow accumulating on the porch. My numb fingers fumbled for the doorknob. Locked, a pathetic whimper escaped, swallowed by the wind. This wasn't just a lockout. It was a brutal, physical statement of eviction. A final, chilling punctuation mark on years of quiet disdain. Adam's shadow shifted, a flicker of movement, then settled. My son, the boy I had poured my entire existence into, nurtured, provided for, protected. He was warm inside, and he wasn't opening the door. He was allowing this. The understanding settled over me, heavy and cold as a tombstone. This wasn't just Clara's raw cruelty. It was his complicity, his silent acquiescence that truly shattered me. This pattern of erasure, of my voice, my presence, diminishing, now stood exposed. 1,000 small cuts had led to this gaping, bleeding wound. The air grew sharper, biting fiercely at my exposed skin. I could feel the cold seeping into my bones, through the thin fabric of my nightgown, numbing my toes. My teeth chattered uncontrollably. This wasn't merely uncomfortable, it was dangerous. They knew it too. This wasn't just punishment, it was a calculated risk, a cruel gamble with my well-being, designed to prove a point about their control. What point? That I was dispensable? That my life, my health, was worth less than their insatiable demands? My mind raced, trying to grasp the enormity of what had just happened. My only son and his wife had just demonstrated a level of callousness I hadn't imagined possible. Even after months of their cold entitlement, they had pushed, and now they had literally pushed me out into the freezing night. It was a slow-motion reckoning, the silent rebellion I had been too blind, or perhaps too hopeful, to acknowledge. All the trust I had placed in them, in family, in love, in the natural bonds of kinship, felt like a crumbling ruin around me. It no longer held, but then, as my fingers cramped from the cold, a different sensation pricked through the numbness, a spark, a tiny, defiant ember in the bitter wind. They thought they had extinguished me, reduced me to a shivering old woman begging at their door. They were about to learn they had not only miscalculated my vulnerability, but they had severely underestimated the very person they were trying to break. They had no idea who they had just locked out. And that was just the beginning. Have you ever faced a moment where everything you thought you knew about someone you loved shattered in an instant? The brutal wind whipping off Lake Superior felt like a cleansing force, stripping away years of illusions. I drove my car through the blinding blizzard, the snow swirling around me like a chaotic, vengeful dance. My fingers, still aching from the cold, gripped the steering wheel. That drive, through the whiteout conditions, felt less dangerous than the emotional storm I'd just left behind. It was a race against the elements, but also a furious, desperate sprint back to a truth I had long buried. To understand how I, a woman who had built an empire from nothing, ended up shivering on a frozen porch, you need to understand who I was before maternal instinct clouded my business judgment, before I let myself become, as Clara had so cruelly put it, a meddling fool. For 38 years, I was Eleanor Vance, founder and CEO of Vance Wealth Management. My office, perched high in downtown Minneapolis, had offered a panoramic view of the Mississippi River, a constant reminder of the steady flow of wealth I oversaw. I didn't just manage money, I grew fortunes. My clients ranged from tech innovators to professional athletes, all entrusting their legacies to the Vance name. I'd started with nothing but a finance degree from the University of Minnesota and a modest inheritance from my grandmother. My husband, David, had been taken from me too soon, at 35, leaving me with a 3-year-old son, Julian. His death, a cruel twist of fate, carved an unshakable determination into my soul. I would never again be financially vulnerable, not myself, and certainly not my son. My first client was me. That small inheritance, invested with rigorous discipline, blossomed. Word spread, organically at first, about the young widow who seemed to possess a Midas touch. What began as informal advice for friends soon grew into a bustling consulting practice, then a registered investment advisory firm, and eventually Vance Wealth Management, managing over $800 million in client assets by the time I turned 60. I practiced what I preached. My personal portfolio, a testament to decades of strategic patience. The first major turning point? A commercial real estate deal in 1987. Others saw a struggling office building. I saw the future of downtown Minneapolis. My vision proved correct. By 1995, that building had quadrupled in value, funneling profits into my next ventures. Upscale rental properties, an early stake in a software company later acquired by a tech giant, and, most lucratively, medical device companies that would define Minneapolis's medical technology corridor. By my 50th birthday, my personal net worth exceeded $3 million. By 70, it stood at $18 million. But more valuable than the money was the knowledge. 38 years of navigating the financial currents taught me how truly wealthy families operated, how they protected and amplified their assets. I understood trusts, estate planning, and asset protection strategies most people never even conceived of. I knew how to craft financial instruments that appeared generous on the surface, yet contained an intricate web of protections designed to activate if recipients ever turned ungrateful or abusive. I had faced every type of financial predator, family manipulator, and wealth-seeking opportunist. I knew their warning signs, their tactics, and I possessed both the resources and the unwavering resolve to protect myself when family members dared to cross the line from gratitude to brazen exploitation. Julian, it turned out, would become my greatest and most painful test. Julian had always been what educators politely call motivationally challenged. Bright and charming, yes, but he struggled with anything requiring sustained effort. His childhood was a graveyard of abandoned ambitions, a neighborhood newspaper that lasted one issue, a lawn care service that ended when the grass grew back, elaborate garage sales that left our basement a cluttered monument to his fleeting interest. I funded these explorations, hoping he'd discover his passion, a path to fulfillment I hadn't had. More honestly, I funded them because I could, and because seeing him excited, even briefly, brought me immense joy. In high school, The pattern intensified. Photography gear, musical instruments, art supplies, expensive relics from brief obsessions filled his room. College was a 6-year odyssey through various majors, eventually yielding a general studies degree that reflected more persistence than passion. After graduation, he returned home, drifting through a series of entry-level jobs: customer service, retail, administrative assistant, each abandoned within months, blamed on unreasonable customers or uncreative management. I enabled him. I gave him a financial safety net, cushioning him from the natural consequences of his choices. When he quit, he returned to the comfort of my penthouse, to my maternal encouragement to keep exploring. In hindsight, I recognize I may have paved the way for the very dependency that would later choke our relationship. When Julian met Clara at 28, I was hopeful. Clara, 25, a nursing graduate from the University of Minnesota, seemed grounded, practical. She came from a middle-class family, understood hard work. She seemed to be a positive influence, encouraging him to stick with jobs longer, helping him budget. I was grateful that someone else was finally guiding him toward responsibility. I paid for their wedding, a $35,000 affair at the Guthrie Theatre, exactly as Clara had dreamed. 6 months later, I provided the $40,000 down payment for their first house in Minnetonka. It was a 4-bedroom colonial, perfectly sized for the family they planned. Their combined income seemed manageable. For the first year, it worked. Julian seemed more consistent. Clara managed their finances carefully. I thought I was witnessing the successful maturation of my son, the beginning of a financially responsible family. What I was actually witnessing, however, was the deceptive calm before a storm of escalating demands, quietly turning my generous support into systematic exploitation. And that quiet transformation would prove far more dangerous than any sudden downpour. Have you ever unknowingly contributed to the very problem you were trying to solve? The delivery room lights seemed brighter than usual, reflecting the overwhelming joy that burst into my life. Julian and Clara welcomed twins, Lily and Leo, 2 years after their wedding. I was there, witnessing that miracle, and immediately, an undeniable urge to protect their future swelled within me. I opened college savings accounts for each child, initial deposits of $25,000, a tangible promise that their dreams wouldn't be limited by financial strain. I had seen too many families struggle with college costs. My grandchildren wouldn't face that. They were beautiful, healthy babies. Lily, born first, was alert, curious, her tiny eyes soaking in the world with intense focus. Leo, 15 minutes her junior, was more relaxed, content to observe his bustling surroundings. As they grew into toddlers, their personalities sharpened. Lily, adventurous and determined, climbed furniture and tested every boundary with fearless persistence. Leo, thoughtful and observant, preferred to watch Lily's daring experiments before deciding whether to join. I loved being their grandmother, deeply involved in their early years. I babysat several evenings a week, freeing Julian and Clara for rare date nights. I helped with feedings, diaper changes, and spent countless hours reading stories, playing games, and teaching them nursery rhymes. It filled a void I hadn't known existed. When Clara decided to reduce her nursing schedule to part-time after the twins' birth, I supported the decision, both emotionally and financially. Having twins is exhausting, even under the best circumstances, and I understood her desire to focus on motherhood. Clara's income dropped, creating a noticeable pressure on their household budget. I was happy to step in, covering extra expenses, daycare costs, medical bills not fully covered by insurance, additional clothing, equipment, the general, creeping increase in household needs that came with expanding a family from 2 to 4. I contributed approximately $15,000 during the twins' first year, money I genuinely considered well spent to ensure Lily and Leo had everything they needed, and that Clara could immerse herself in motherhood without constant financial stress. During their toddler years, my active involvement and financial contributions continued. When they outgrew their cribs, I purchased beautiful matching bedroom sets, car seats, strollers, high chairs, the endless array of toddler necessities. These were gifts that brought me immense joy to give. When Lily showed an early interest in music, I bought a small piano and arranged for lessons. When Leo's mechanical aptitude emerged with building blocks, I provided increasingly sophisticated construction sets. I loved watching them discover their individual talents, grateful for the resources to support their development in ways their parents might not have been able to afford independently. What I didn't recognize then was how my consistent generosity was subtly training Julian and Clara. Instead of learning to prioritize, to save, to make difficult choices about discretionary spending, they were learning a different lesson. Eleanor will handle it. It was becoming a viable financial strategy. By the time Lily and Leo turned 3, my contributions had ballooned to approximately $25,000 annually. These weren't just emergency expenses or special occasions anymore. They were regular, ongoing costs that had somehow shifted from their ledger to mine. I still justified it, telling myself I was simply being a loving grandmother, investing in the twins' development, making life easier for my son and his wife. But it wasn't making their lives easier in the way I'd intended. It was creating a dangerous dynamic where my financial support transformed from a gift into an expectation. Julian and Clara began making decisions not based on what they could afford, but on what I could afford. The foundation was being laid for the systematic exploitation and insidious entitlement that would escalate dramatically over the following years. At the time, it felt like love. Now I see it for what it truly was, the careful cultivation of dependence. And the next test of their expectations was just around the corner. Have you ever given so much that it stopped feeling like a gift and started feeling like an obligation? The polite conversation about kindergarten options was the first tremor beneath the polished surface of our family life. Lily and Leo, now 5, were ready for school. The neighborhood public school was perfectly fine. Well-funded, experienced teachers, a diverse student body. It offered a strong academic foundation, free of charge. But Clara, her laptop open on the dining room table, had been researching. "Eleanor?" she began, her tone carefully earnest. "I've been visiting schools, and I truly think the twins would benefit from smaller class sizes, more individualized attention." She gestured to a brochure for St. Catherine's Academy. Glossy pages showcasing idyllic classrooms and smiling children. The public school has 28 kids per class. St. Catherine's has only 15, with 2 teachers in each room. Julian chimed in, his voice laced with the familiar blend of ambition and hopeful dependence. "And honestly, Mum, we want Lily and Leo to have every advantage we can give them. Education is the foundation for everything, and we don't want them limited by our financial situation." The words hung in the air, a thinly veiled plea. St. Catherine's was indeed excellent, but it was also expensive. $9,000 per child, $18,000 annually. Money Julian and Clara simply didn't have on their combined income. Clara smiled, a practiced, almost innocent expression. "We know it's a big expense, but we thought maybe this could be an early Christmas and birthday gift for the twins. Instead of toys they'll outgrow, we could invest in education that will benefit them for their entire lives." The request was artfully presented as my idea, a substitution for gifts, not an additional burden. They had calculated precisely how to make an $18,000 annual commitment for the next 13 years seem reasonable, even noble. I agreed. I believed in excellent education. I wanted Lily and Leo to maximize their potential. I could afford it without hardship, but more profoundly, I agreed because I trusted their judgment as parents, wanting to support them, not create conflict. What I didn't realize was that this decision established a dangerous precedent. My financial support would now be available for any expense Julian and Clara deemed beneficial for their family, regardless of whether they could afford it. St. Catherine's tuition became the first major recurring cost I was simply expected to handle. No more discussions. No annual reconsiderations. It was just understood. Eleanor would pay. 2 years after the twins started at St. Catherine's, the next escalation arrived. Julian decided property management wasn't fulfilling his entrepreneurial potential. He needed to transition to a career with unlimited income growth and creative autonomy. His chosen path: real estate sales. "Mum, I've been thinking about this for months," Julian explained during one of our weekly coffee meetings. His eyes gleamed with a familiar, fleeting enthusiasm. "Property management is steady, but it's never going to provide the kind of income that allows Clara to stay home with the kids full-time, or gives us the flexibility to really build wealth for our family's future." The decision was risky, extremely. Commission-based sales, given their growing financial obligations and Clara's part-time income, felt like financial suicide. "I know there's some financial risk during the transition period," Julian continued, oblivious to my growing dread. "But I've been talking to successful agents, and the income potential is truly unlimited for someone willing to work hard and build relationships." What he conveniently omitted was the substantial upfront investment required: licensing, training, marketing materials, and, most critically, living expenses during the initial period when new agents typically earn next to nothing. "We were hoping you might be able to help us through the transition," Clara added, her voice soft but insistent, "just until Julian gets established and starts earning consistent commissions." That transition period stretched into 18 months, costing approximately $45,000. It covered everything: real estate courses, a professional wardrobe, brochures, even a new car lease to make the right impression. Julian insisted it was an investment in our family's future earning potential, promising vague payback once he was established. I funded it. I believed in supporting family, in career satisfaction. I hoped higher earnings would eventually reduce their dependence. Instead, Julian's real estate career generated minimal income, while requiring ongoing expenses for continuing education and marketing. After 18 months, he was earning around $35,000 annually, less than his previous salary, a far cry from unlimited potential. But instead of admitting failure, they reframed his meager earnings as building toward future success. My financial support, once a bridge, became the entire foundation. The career change had actually increased their dependence on my funding. It had been presented as a temporary investment, but it was quickly becoming a permanent drain. This creeping expansion, a golden leash subtly tightening, was designed to control not just my money, but my decisions. The lifestyle inflation that followed, however, would truly expose the insidious nature of their expectations. Have you ever seen a small indulgence grow into an insatiable expectation? My financial contributions became a steady current, and Julian and Clara's lifestyle inflated with it, their expenses swelling far beyond their actual income. This shift happened subtly, always cloaked in justifications of the twins' needs, Julian's business requirements, or Clara's household management. The twins' extracurricular activities, once simple interests, multiplied, intensifying far beyond anything resembling normal childhood enrichment. Lily's piano lessons morphed into voice coaching, then dance classes, then art instruction. Leo's building blocks graduated to robotics classes, then computer programming camp, then advanced mathematics tutoring. Each activity, presented as vital for development and talent discovery, collectively cost around $1,200 per month in fees, equipment, and transportation. "We want Lily and Leo to have every opportunity to discover their passions," Clara would explain, eyes bright. So many successful adults trace their achievements back to childhood activities that sparked their interests. Family vacations, once special treats, became annual expectations, and the cost, it rocketed. Disney World at age 7, $8,000. A Caribbean cruise at 8, $9,500. a ski trip to Colorado at 12,000. Each trip was framed as family bonding and creating memories that will last a lifetime, yet documented extensively on social media, projecting a lifestyle far beyond their actual means. Clara even started a family blog, The Vance Family Adventures, a carefully curated, aspirational chronicle of their lavish life, demanding constant investment in new photography equipment and editing software, all presented as building our family brand. Most concerning was the way these choices were presented to me, not as options, but as accomplished facts requiring my immediate payment. "Eleanor, I've registered Lily for the advanced dance intensive this summer," Clara would announce, mid-dinner. "The program fee is $2,800. She'll need new performance outfits. Her director says she has real potential." Julian would then add, "Mum, I've put a deposit down on the Colorado ski condo for next winter. Rates go up after March, so I wanted to secure our dates early. Total cost is about $11,000, but it's going to be such an amazing experience for the kids." These pronouncements were perfectly structured. To refuse meant denying Lily her dance potential, or disappointing the twins by cancelling their amazing ski vacation. It was emotional blackmail, disguised as innocent planning. How could I prioritize money over family experiences and children's opportunities? Cumulatively, these decisions demanded approximately $85,000 annually, beyond what Julian and Clara could possibly afford. I was, quite literally, funding an upper-middle-class life for a family whose actual income was firmly middle class. They lived in a beautiful home, took expensive vacations, and offered their children premium opportunities, all while being completely dependent on my contributions. The troubling aspect wasn't the amount. I could still easily afford it. It was the complete transformation in how these contributions were requested, received, and acknowledged. What began as grateful requests had hardened into matter-of-fact announcements about expenses I was simply expected to handle, without question or complaint. They stopped asking for help. They started informing me about costs. They stopped expressing gratitude. They started expressing expectations. My contributions transformed from generous gifts into natural family resources, which they were entitled to. They had stopped making any effort to live within their means, to develop financial independence. My support wasn't temporary assistance. It was the indefinite bedrock of their chosen standard of living. I was being used, my generosity mistaken for a limitless well. The stage was set for an escalation that would eventually push my tolerance beyond its breaking point. They had established a pattern of escalating demands, diminishing gratitude, and increasing entitlement that would soon lead them to cross boundaries I didn't even know I had. But first, they would need to test precisely how far their advantage extended, and that test was coming sooner than any of us realized. Have you ever felt your generosity being taken for granted, morphing from a gift into an expectation? The first year of what I now recognized as systematic exploitation began with what Clara, with unsettling gravitas, called a family financial optimization meeting. She had prepared spreadsheets, printed articles on multi-generational wealth, and arranged the dining room table like a corporate boardroom. Her laptop glowed with a PowerPoint presentation she'd clearly spent considerable time crafting. "Eleanor," Clara began, her voice smooth, almost clinical, "we've been thinking about how we can be more strategic about our financial planning. Right now, we're handling expenses in a somewhat random way, and we think there might be more efficient approaches that benefit everyone." She clicked through slides, each one professionally designed, charting my annual contributions, $85,000 in direct support, plus gifts and special expenses. She showed projections of how that money could be optimized through different structures. "For instance," she continued, a practiced smile on her face, "instead of you paying the twins' tuition directly, we could set up educational trusts that provide tax advantages and create more formal structures for their college planning." Julian jumped in, his enthusiasm genuine but feeling strangely rehearsed. "Mum, What Clara has discovered is that we've been thinking too small. Instead of year-by-year expenses, we should be thinking long-term wealth management strategies that protect everyone's interests. Their optimization involved consolidating my contributions into regular monthly transfers, giving them predictable access to funding, while creating tax advantages that primarily benefited their household. We're not asking for more money, Clara emphasized, her gaze unwavering. We're asking for smarter money management that makes the same contributions work more effectively for everyone. But buried in the polished details were red flags: joint accounts for family expenses, automatic transfers, financial arrangements designed to make it near impossible for me to reduce or eliminate my contributions without causing immediate hardship for their household. This is about creating financial security for the twins, Julian explained, the familiar shield of their children deployed. If something happened to you, Emma and Leo's education would be at risk. This structure would protect their stability. They were presenting it as protecting the children from changes in my financial situation, when they were truly seeking protection from a change in my willingness to subsidize their life indefinitely. I agreed to consider their proposals. I wanted to be open, but I insisted on reviewing any proposed changes with my own financial advisor, James Chen, before implementing anything. What I discovered during that review was a cold, calculated truth. Eleanor, James said, his voice diplomatically direct, these arrangements would essentially convert your voluntary financial support into mandatory financial obligations. Once these structures are in place, withdrawing your support would be legally and practically complicated and would likely create significant hardship for their family. The tax benefits for you are minimal, but for Julian and Clara, they'd gain predictable monthly income without the uncertainty of requesting your approval for each expense. I declined. I preferred flexibility. I wasn't comfortable with the level of ongoing obligation their proposals would have created. Julian and Clara seemed to accept my decision with understanding, a facade that would soon crack. My refusal to formalize their access to my money, I later realized, prompted them to pursue even more insidious strategies for securing their financial dependence on me. The game was shifting, and the stakes were about to rise dramatically. Have you ever seen a polite request morph into a blatant demand for control? My refusal to formalize their access to my money didn't stop them. It merely shifted their strategy. Julian and Clara began weaving a far more insidious web, using emotional manipulation and calculated isolation. It started subtly. Quiet hints dropped like pebbles into a still pond. Eleanor, Clara would sigh at dinner. We've been eating at home more often, trying to be careful with our budget now that the twins' activities are so expensive. Julian would add, the kids want to go back to Disney World, but we have to be responsible. They wanted me to volunteer, to offer more without ever asking directly. They wanted the illusion of my generosity without the inconvenience of my consent. When I didn't immediately offer more funds, their pressure escalated. The twins became their unwitting instruments. Grandma Eleanor, Lily would ask, her eyes wide and earnest. Why can't we go to Disney World? Madison's family is going. Leo, innocent, added, everyone in my robotics class has the advanced AR programming kit except me. Mum says it's too expensive. Don't you have $300? My heart ached with genuine love, but the sharp sting of manipulation was undeniable. They were using my grandchildren, their innocent desires, as leverage against me. Then came the calculated isolation. My weekly bridge games with Margaret, my longtime friends, suddenly became too stressful for someone my age. My involvement in charity board meetings was too much responsibility. Even former clients seeking my advice became unnecessary stress I should avoid in retirement. Clara and Julian became my gatekeepers, filtering calls, managing my calendar, always with the saccharine justification that it was for my well-being. One evening, Margaret, my bridge partner for 15 years, called. Eleanor, I haven't seen you in weeks. Is everything all right? You seem to have disappeared from all our usual activities." When I explained Julian and Clara's concerns, Margaret's voice sharpened. "Eleanor, that doesn't sound like you. Are you sure their concerns are about your well-being or about controlling your time and attention?" The question, sharp and direct, planted a seed of doubt, a crack in the perfectly constructed bubble they were building around me. The isolation deepened. Even my personal passions became targets. My art collection, my vintage wine cellar, my long-planned international trips. Suddenly, these were too much to manage, dangerous, risky for my age. Each suggestion, framed as love and care, slowly chipped away at my personal fulfillment. Their unspoken message was clear. My time, my energy, my resources should be directed solely toward their family's needs and interests, not my own. The erosion of my authority over my own money was the most insidious shift. It began with the twins' academic tutoring. Clara announced, without consulting me, that Lily and Leo needed supplemental tutoring in mathematics and advanced reading comprehension to stay competitive at St. Catherine's, a $25,000 annual cost. We've already spoken with the tutoring center and scheduled assessments for both children, Julian added, as if it was a done deal. They have an opening starting next week, but we need to confirm enrollment by Wednesday. The timing pressure was artificial, designed to prevent me from researching alternatives or even from refusing. They had involved the twins, created excitement, and then presented it as a confirmed plan needing my immediate funding. To say no meant disappointing my grandchildren, disrupting plans already set. This pattern repeated. Family vacation plans were researched, destinations selected, and reservations made before I was informed of the costs and asked for funding. Extracurricular activities were chosen, schedules arranged, and equipment purchased before I was consulted about the expenses. "We wanted to handle all the logistics, so you wouldn't have to worry," Julian would explain, his voice dripping with faux concern. But what was truly happening was my exclusion from the decision-making process. While I was still expected to be the ever-present ATM, my role was reduced to providing money for choices made by other people, their preferences taking priority over my own. The most shocking example of this authority transfer came when Clara declared their house needed significant renovations, a stunning $120,000 project, a kitchen expansion, an additional bathroom, a finished basement. She presented detailed plans and contractor quotes, clearly worked on for months. "We've gotten quotes from 3 contractors, and we think this will significantly improve our family's quality of life," Julian added, as if their lifestyle upgrade was our shared necessity. Most importantly, they had already selected contractors, finalized plans, and scheduled construction to begin within 6 weeks, all without a word to me about funding or even my input on the design. "We just need your approval for the funding," Julian stated, his hand outstretched, waiting for the check. My role was purely financial. Provide the money and trust their judgment. This systematic control, this slow, deliberate erosion of my autonomy and dignity, was a painful, eye-opening experience. They thought they had successfully established dominance over my life and resources. They had no idea the final confrontation was hurtling towards them, a confrontation that would test exactly how far their control extended and how much autonomy I was willing to sacrifice to maintain a relationship that now felt like a gilded cage. Have you ever felt trapped by the very people you helped the most, watching your generosity turn into a weapon against you? The blizzard outside howled, but the real storm raged silently in Julian and Clara's kitchen, unseen until their words cut through the winter night. I was reading in the living room, a temporary guest due to my penthouse's heating repairs, a calculated test of their control, I would later realize. Their voices, hushed at first, grew animated. "She's being completely unreasonable about the estate planning." Clara's frustrated whisper drifted from the kitchen. "We've given her multiple opportunities to do the right thing for the family, and she keeps refusing. Julian's exasperated sigh followed. I know. Sometimes I think she's becoming selfish in her old age. She has more money than she could spend in 3 lifetimes, but she acts like helping her own family is some kind of burden. My stomach twisted. They were discussing me, the person who had quietly funded their lavish life for 2 years, as a problematic obligation. And the way she questions every expense, Clara continued, her voice rising. Like we're trying to take advantage of her, instead of just providing normal opportunities for our children. Lily and Leo deserve the same advantages as their classmates, and Eleanor acts like we're being greedy for wanting the best for our kids. The casual assumption that my wealth was theirs, coupled with their resentment of my reluctance to surrender control, chilled me. Maybe we need to be more direct about our expectations, Julian suggested, his voice dropping. She's going to leave us everything eventually anyway, so why is she making it so DMN difficult to access resources that will ultimately benefit the family? The phrase, access resources, was a knife twist. I've been thinking... Clara's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Maybe it's time to have a serious conversation about Eleanor's living situation. This house is getting crowded, and honestly, she's becoming more demanding and difficult to manage. My blood turned to ice. What do you mean? Julian asked. I mean, Clara replied, her tone ominously soft. Maybe it's time for her to consider assisted living. Some kind of senior community where she'd have professional care, and we wouldn't have to worry about managing her needs on top of everything else we're dealing with. They were plotting my institutionalization, not for my well-being, but for their convenience, for control. She's still pretty independent, Julian doubted. For now, Clara responded. But she's showing signs of cognitive decline, and her expectations about family financial support are becoming unrealistic. Maybe professional care would help her develop more appropriate perspectives about money management and family relationships. They were planning to use fabricated health concerns to gain power of attorney, to isolate me further. I walked into the kitchen. A phantom, my presence unannounced, the calm determination that had served me in countless boardrooms now a shield. I heard your conversation, I said, my voice quiet, watching their faces drain of color, panic blooming in their eyes. I heard you discussing assisted living facilities and my cognitive decline, and your frustrations with my financial boundaries. Clara's voice, artificially sweet, quivered. Eleanor, you misunderstood. We were just discussing contingency planning. No, I cut her off. You were discussing how to get rid of me because my presence has become inconvenient and because I'm not giving you the level of financial control you want. Julian tried. Mum, that's not... Stop, I interrupted. I heard exactly what you said. You think I'm selfish for not giving you unlimited access to my money. You think I'm becoming difficult to manage. You think I should be in professional care so you don't have to deal with my expectations and boundaries. The kitchen fell silent, thick with their exposed truth. And you? I looked directly at Clara. You think I'm showing signs of cognitive decline because I won't agree to your estate planning schemes? You think professional care would help me develop more appropriate perspectives about family financial support? Clara's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and anger. Eleanor, we're trying to think about what's best for everyone. Sometimes that requires difficult conversations about realistic planning. Realistic planning, I repeated, bitter. Is that what you call scheming to institutionalize me so you can gain control over my assets? Mom, we're not scheming anything. Julian finally found his voice. We're just trying to prepare for different scenarios. Everyone's needs, I said, the words heavy with irony, meaning your need to access my money without having to ask for it or account for how you spend it. The pretense shattered. Clara's true feelings erupted, raw and vicious. You know what, Eleanor? Maybe it's time for some honesty. Her voice shook with barely controlled rage. We have been thinking about everyone's needs, including yours. And your needs include having family who care about you and are willing to manage the responsibilities that you're becoming less capable of handling yourself. Less capable? I asked, incredulous. Yes, less capable, she spat. You're 70 years old. You live alone in a huge penthouse. You're isolated from appropriate social activities, and you're making financial decisions based on outdated ideas about money management and family obligations. Julian tried to interject. Clara, maybe we should... No, Julian, she snapped. Your mother needs to hear this. Eleanor, we've been patient with your resistance to practical planning, but your stubbornness is creating problems for everyone. Lily and Leo need stability. Julian and I need to plan for our family's future, and you need to accept that your role in this family is changing. My role is changing? Yes. You're becoming dependent on us for companionship, care, and practical support. We're the ones managing your social calendar, helping with your medical appointments, making sure you're not isolated or vulnerable. But instead of being grateful for our care, you're fighting us about financial arrangements that would benefit everyone. The audacity of her manipulation was breathtaking. She was reframing their exploitation as care I should be grateful for. And frankly, she continued, your attitude about money is becoming problematic. You act like providing opportunities for your grandchildren and supporting your son's career development is some kind of imposition rather than a normal family responsibility. Family responsibility? I countered. Yes, when you have wealth and other family members need support, helping them isn't charity, it's obligation. Lily and Leo didn't choose to have a grandmother with resources and parents with limited income. They shouldn't be penalized because you want to hoard money instead of using it to benefit the people you claim to love. Clara had just articulated their entire entitled philosophy. My wealth wasn't mine. It was a family resource I was selfishly hoarding. So what exactly are you proposing? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Julian and Clara exchanged glances. We're proposing that you start acting like a responsible family member instead of a selfish old woman who cares more about controlling money than caring for people. The words hung in the air. A venomous slap. And if I don't? Clara's response was swift, brutal. Then maybe you should consider whether this family arrangement is working for anyone. Maybe you'd be happier living somewhere else where you can control your money and your decisions without having to consider how they affect other people. She was threatening to cut off my access to my grandchildren if I didn't submit. Are you telling me to leave? I'm telling you to decide whether you want to be part of this family or apart from this family, Clara said with cold finality. Because right now, your attitude is making it very difficult for everyone else. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. You're absolutely right, Clara, I said. A calm that surprised even me settling over me. This arrangement isn't working for everyone, and I am going to decide whether I want to be part of this family dynamic or apart from it. I walked to the front door and pulled on my coat. Where are you going? Julian asked, sudden alarm in his voice. I'm going outside to think about your ultimatum, I replied. I need some fresh air to consider my decision. Eleanor, it's 15 below zero, Clara protested. You can't go outside in this weather. Actually, I can, I said, pulling the door open. It's my decision to make. The brutal cold hit my face like a physical blow. Eleanor, come back inside, Julian called. We can discuss this reasonably. No, I called back. Clara just told me to decide whether I want to be part of this family or apart from it. I'm going to think about that decision. I stood on the porch, looking out at the snow-covered street, feeling the cold seep into my clothes. Behind me, I heard Julian and Clara arguing in hushed voices. After 10 minutes, I was genuinely cold. I tried the front door handle. It was locked. I knocked. Julian, the door is locked. No response. I knocked harder. Julian, Clara, the door is locked. I could see their silhouettes through the frosted glass, standing in the hallway, looking at me, but not moving. I knocked again, genuinely alarmed by the cold, confused by their cruelty. Let me in! It's freezing out here. Clara's face appeared at the window, her features distorted by the glass, her voice muffled but chillingly clear. Maybe this will teach you not to interfere with our family decisions. Then she walked away from the door, leaving me standing outside in sub-zero temperatures, in my nightgown and coat. I stood there for a moment, stunned. My son and daughter-in-law had just locked me outside their house in life-threatening weather conditions because I refused to submit to their financial ultimatum. They were willing to risk my physical safety to make a point about their control over my life and resources. That's when everything became crystal clear about who they truly were and what our relationship had truly become. Standing on that frozen porch, a moment of absolute clarity cut through 2 years of gradual manipulation. Julian and Clara had just demonstrated they were willing to risk my life to maintain control over my money. They thought I was powerless to resist because I was financially and emotionally dependent on them. They thought my love for Lily and Leo meant I would submit to any treatment. They thought my age and isolation meant I had no alternatives. Most critically, they thought my wealth was effectively their wealth, and my resistance was temporary stubbornness. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. I walked to my car, parked in their snow-dusted driveway, and drove back to my penthouse through the blizzard. The most dangerous drive of my life. I spent the rest of that night, warm and safe, making a series of phone calls that would demonstrate to Julian and Clara exactly how much power they had underestimated, and exactly how expensive their mistreatment of me was about to become. Have you ever had a moment of such profound betrayal that it completely reshaped your understanding of someone you loved? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories of reclaiming power and demand.